Okay, now let's begin making the material ID maps. The process is pretty simple. Let me change this lighting here. And remove the backdrop. Okay. What we're going to do is use this normal map information here, all of this pixel information, to create separate materials, which we're just going to use solid colors for, and then we'll import that material ID map so that each solid color will represent a different material type, whether steel or metal, rubber, plastic, in the our material layering application. And in our case, we're going to use Substance Designer. So first things you want to do before you close out of nDo is you want to make sure all of your layers here, your parent folders, are zipped for three reasons. To verify they're zipped, you select the layer and you make sure that there's a dark gray icon over the zipper here. The first reason is it reduces the file size when you save the Photoshop document. Second reason is you will increase performance of nDo significantly. And the third reason is when you zip the file, you'll see that you have your information here. It's all been compressed into a top layer. So we can use this information, this layer here, to control left click, and you'll see that you have a selection already made from your pixel information. Okay, Control D to deselect. And we're going to use what we created here in the normals to have different materials for these separate objects. Okay, so once you verify all these layers are zipped, you can close nDo to save some performance in your computer. We're going to select the Photoshop document and hit Control N to create a new one, and we're going to call this box haul _MID for material ID, but you can call it whatever you want. 1024 by 1024 is perfect because it has to match the texture document size that we did for the normal map. Transparent background is fine. Hit OK. Here's our new document. And now we need to do two things. One, I'm going to import the UV overlay from the first document, because for most of these textures I'm going to use the normal map layers to create different materials, but for some of these objects like the pipes, there is no pixel information. There's no normal map that I can quickly select and fill in a separate material for this, so I have to have the UV overlay to paint the colors directly over this object. So to go back to the other Photoshop document I have open, I can hit Control Tab while in Photoshop, and that'll cycle through your open documents quickly. I'm going to select the box haul UV overlay here and select duplicate layer. The name is fine. The most important part here is selecting box haul MID under the document I want to place it in. Hit OK and Control Tab back over to my MID material ID document, and here's my UV overlay here, currently hidden. Okay. The next step, Control Tab back over to our normal map document. I want to take each layer that I created here and make it a separate layer in the Material ID document. The reason I want to do that is I want each layer to be easily selected and filled in with colors in the beginning to make our job a little bit faster. So I'm going to select the drop down arrow here. Make sure you select this actual layer and then Control left click on this icon to create the selection. And I'm going to copy this contents by hitting Control C. If you don't have this layer selected, say you have the parent folder selected and you try to hit Control C, there's no pixel information in this parent folder to select, so you'll get an error in Photoshop. So just make sure you have this here selected. Cancel. Control Tab to the other document and use Control Shift V to paste in place. I believe Control Shift V is a default shortcut key in Photoshop for paste in place. If you don't have it, just from your edit menu, select copy and then use paste in place, which I believe is in paste special, paste in place. I may have created that on my own, I'm not sure. Control Tab back over. We're going to close this layer and we're going to do the same thing for each one of these quickly. Control C, Control Tab, Control Shift V to paste over. Next one. select the layer, Control left click, Control C, Control Tab to move over, Control Shift V to paste, Control Tab to go back, Control left click to select the layer contents, copy. And we may not have, there we go. There's a bit of a delay because of my screen capture software. And I may have to turn OpenGL performance off in Photoshop to save some speed here. Control copy, Control paste that layer. There we go. Control copy, Control Shift V. Select, Control left click, Control C, Control Tab over, and Control Shift V to paste in place. Okay, now I want to hide all of these layers that I created because I don't need to see them. And they're ugly. The reason that they're gray is that's really the color that these layers are in nDo. They use an overlay feature at the very top of their layer stack here to create the normal colors, apparently. So when you hide this layer, it's gray like that, so don't be alarmed. That's just how it works. Okay, I want to hide this layer information, and then I want to place my UV layer here at the top of the stack because I want it to be visible above all my colors that I'm going to be creating. And now I want to select the bottom layer because that's the blank layer that was created when I created the new Photoshop document. And I want to fill this bottom layer with my base material color, so I don't have any white or transparent information. Everything at a minimum in this on this object is going to have, or at least begin with, a certain material. All right, I'm just going to fill it in. I'm going to hide my UV overlays because I'm just going to use a bucket fill here. And in my in the level I was using, I had the gunmetal as a base for all of my assets. So if I use this palette here, this isn't one I created. I got it from nDo, which is the texturing application here from Quixel, and they include a color palette in their product that you can use and drop into Photoshop. It's a great way to get started with different materials, and that way across projects and across teams you have one standard material color for each type, so that there's no confusion. And this is really helpful because when you're creating a lot of assets, and we'll explain more in Substance Designer, but if you're creating many assets and you want them all to share the same material types, you want to create use the same material IDs for each asset, so you can quickly plug in. You can create your model your asset, create your normal maps, and then plug in a material ID map, and all the colors match the asset you made before. So when you plug it into your nodes in Substance Designer, automatically you'll generate unique materials for that particular asset. So you want to use the same colors so Substance Designer knows which colors represent which materials. We'll explain that in more detail. But in this case, I'm going to select the gunmetal here, and you can see the eyedropper tool forms. Your color in Photoshop will change to match. I hit G for bucket fill, and then I just fill the entire document with that material ID. This doesn't necessarily represent the actual color of the material I'm using. It can be any color you want. These are just the ones that I'm using. Okay, next you want to go through and Control left click each one of these layers that we transferred over from our other document, and I'm going to fill them with unique material IDs. It doesn't matter what kind of material you use. You want it to be realistic, you know. So if you have a pipe here, you probably want it to be metal, but you can make plastic. You can do whatever you want. The most important thing I try to cover is making sure that I have different materials on big surfaces like this, right, to create more interest. So if I have a gunmetal here that's more of a diffuse metal with very little reflection or glossiness, I might want, and it's a dark color, I might want to make this a painted metal or a shiny metal to bring attention to this asset that I created here and create more interest on the whole face, right? So it's not so boring. So let me go back to my Photoshop document here, and I'm going to rename this layer gunmetal so I know what it is, and then I'm going to create a new layer using Control Shift N, and then I'm going to call this one steel. And I'm going to start adding steel material color here in my palette, and using either the bucket fill for G, I can fill the entire contents with a steel color. and then I'm going to control left click layer 3 and either use a bucket fill or just a brush to fill it, the contents. I'm going to do the same thing with layer 4, bucket fill, and I know I'm doing everything steel right now, but what I'm really trying to do is just create some breakup between colors, some contrast. And then when I can view the document in 3Do, I can change the material ID based on what I want. This is a good example. I can fill this in with steel here, but since I already see these steel bolts right here, I may want to do a different material ID so I don't lose that detail and color that I created. So I'm going to create a new layer here, Control-Shift-N, and call this Painted Metal. Select Painted Metal from my swatch up here. G for bucket fill, and I have Painted Metal. And so I realized that the IDs, that the bolts that I had above it have disappeared because Painted Metal's on top. I can move the Painted Metal down below steel to have those show through, and we'll see if that works with our layer stack here. Let's select our, is that our final layer? No, layer 8. Let's fill this, let's also do Painted Metal with this one, see how it goes. Okay, Control D to deselect those contents. Now, I'm going to hit Control H to hide those guides. So now if I want to view this document just to see how it appears in 3Do, you can open a 3Do custom loader up here by selecting the drop down arrow. And you have this option to load maps. You can load maps using a file, or you can use your currently open Photoshop document to quickly export it over to 3Do. And I'm just going to use the albedo map just because it's a flat color. That's really all I care about at the moment. So if you select this link here next to albedo, it's going to send this document over to 3Do. You can see that the document, or the image, has gotten quite a bit darker because well, that's just the material ID that I have there. If you want, you can use a brighter image, background image. There you go. Make it a little bit easier to see, perhaps. Or you can use the same one and increase the brightness. Either way, I'll do both. Okay, now I can see what I have going on. Now you can take a look at your object here, and you can see how you want to break it up. So for example, I don't like this painted metal here on top of this other one. You lose this metal plate. And besides, I'd rather have this be a glossy and reflective plate to kind of make these little details pop a little bit more. So I can see that form right down here below this plate. So what I can do is I can select from my layer stack down here, just Control left click until I find the one I'm looking for. There we go. It's on layer 7. And instead of using the bucket fill tool, I want to make this part steel. But if I just use the bucket fill tool, obviously I'll fill everything else here with a steel color. I don't want to do that. So I'm going to hit B for my brush tool. I would decrease the size a little bit. And I'm just going to paint in this part here. Just like that. And then I'm going to select this link next to albedo again, and it's going to send that information over to 3Do. I can take a look at it. I like that better. And you kind of have to use your imagination a little bit here, because in my mind's eye I see this as a shiny piece of metal. And again, if you don't like this when you're using a document like Substance Designer, you can come back and quickly change your material IDs in Substance Designer because it uses nodes. It'll automatically update your model with the steel texture if you change your material IDs, and we'll explain that later. So what you do here, you're not necessarily stuck with. It's just something to begin with, right? So here, I think what I want to do is make this circle steel, perhaps, and then maybe make that triangle yellow. Let's see if we can quickly do that. Again, this right now it's an aesthetic choice that you make, right? It's up to you how you want this to look. and you have to like it. It may be tricky, now that I'm looking at these selection options, to make that middle part steel. I might just leave it as is to save some time. But what I know I want to do is take these pipes here and make them shinier steel, right, rather than a gunmetal, because that makes more sense to me at least. And maybe I'll do the same with this motor. So to do that, because I don't have normal information to quickly select, I'm going to open up my UV overlay, deselect those items, and I can see here where I unwrap these pipes. I unwrap the pipes as a rectangle, right? So I can quickly make that selection here. You can do this a couple ways. You can use a marquee select like this. Change that to a rectangle. And then you can Control G fill it, but I want to make sure I have my steel layer selected before I do that. There we go. That information's been filled. But I also want to make sure that I don't have all layers checked either, because if you have all layers checked with the fill tool, it's going to limit your fill based on the UV overlay that you have here. So V, I'm just going to Alt and Shift drag what I just created over to this one, because it's the same size. Maybe use the left arrow to nudge it over a bit. Okay, hide this layer, and then let's send this over to 3Do to see how it looks. Okay, you can see our pipes have changed. I'm probably going to make this hose rubber. I'm going to make all of these from this spigot here, make all those shiny steel. Do the same for these pipes. So let's find that information in the UV layout document here. Okay, I'm going to do a marquee select around this. G to fill. And do another marquee selection around this pipe here. I don't have to go all the way up. What I can do is just fill this here, and then hit the V key for my select tool, hold Alt and Shift. Alt will make the copy and Shift will constrain the direction that I'm dragging this, right? Alt Shift drag up. Because these my UV islands are so close together, if I could just zoom out and make this selection really quick, but it can be a little tedious, right, to make sure I get my marquee between these pieces. I believe that's accurate, so let me hide this top layer and then hit refresh. There we go. I got that long pipe there. And now I want to make sure I get these little guys. If I remember correctly, I can see them in the UV island layout. And if you ever forget where your mesh items correspond to your UV layout, you can always just open the mesh in your 3D application. And I may even do that now, just so I make sure I have this straight and I save you guys some time. Okay, so I'll switch over to Blender, and I'll deselect the whole mesh, and I'm looking for these small pipes up here. So we go to this object, select those. Okay, that's the pipe there and the one there. Okay, marquee select, and then G to fill that portion. And it's the one there. Okay, hide the UV layer and send that back over. See how we're doing. Okay, good. Now I just want to make sure I get the flanges. Maybe that top cap, this pipe there, and that there. Okay, so this flange, this one. This. Oh. Make sure I get the flanges by the wall. And that's all one piece. Okay, so now I'm interested in these objects here, all the ones that are orange. So let's go back over to our UV layout, activate our UV layer, and then I'll make sure I color those in with a steel color. Box select. And an alternative to this method is you can just create diffuse colors in your 3D application, and just based on each object you can color it a different material color and then bake that onto a texture map as well if you don't want to go through and select items like I'm doing here. So this item here, I could even just take the brush if I really want it to be less precise and paint it this way. Make sure I have those other items deselected. This counts as well. Makes it a little smaller. And these items here. These items down here. I'm noticing some slowdown here in Photoshop, and what I'm going to try to do is I think I'll just turn off the OpenGL drawing quick, so I'm going to pause the video and I'll be right back. Okay, this might move faster for me here. And it may be less choppy for you on your end also. Sorry. Sometimes moving over between applications, I forget the hotkeys. Make the selections. We're almost complete here. Okay. Take a look at our document in the window here. Good. We have our nozzle. We have, I missed a flange here. And that's probably one of these that I've missed. It appears it's this one down here. Right there. Let's try this. Okay, let's refresh this. There we go. I have it. Okay, I'll take a look around, and I want to make sure I get this guy here, which I don't have selected. He's right over here. This process can take time. It takes more time if you're talking someone through it, so you could probably work through this much faster than I am once you get practice. But overall, it can save you time if you're doing if you're having a hard time baking your materials and you're doing high poly work. I love programs like ZBrush or even 3D modeling applications for high poly work, but sometimes baking to low poly assets can be such a headache that this process really can help. Okay, so looking around, what I might want to do is I might want to remove this painted metal here on these handles. It wouldn't really make sense that this part would be painted. I mean, maybe I'll make it steel, but I think I'll just remove it altogether. So let me find the location of that asset here in my 3D application. Roughly, let's see, that's not going to work. It'll be down on the side of the object, right here. So I'm going to go over to the painted metal layer, and I'm just going to delete or erase that information right here. There we go. Refresh. There we go. That makes more sense to me. Now I'm going to do a separate layer for this hose. I want to make it a rubber color. So I'm going to create a new layer down here using Control-Shift-N. Call it rubber. Select the rubber material ID from my palette. And then I'm going to find my hose. It's up here. So these two rectangles laid out. Zoom out here. Activate my UV overlay. And marquee box select around that object. And I have some overlap here. So what you can do with your marquee tool is you can hold Alt and then drag, and you can remove some of your selection area. Alt and drag here. Not sure what happened there. Try that again. Alt drag. Good. I think I'll be okay down here, but let me just remove this also. Okay. G, and then I will fill with my rubber color. Not sure why my object's being deselected. There we go. Okay. The rubber color is a slightly brighter than the gunmetal. I can see it on my monitor. I'm not sure if you'll be able to after the video is compressed and put online. And let's see. Let's change the motor to a steel color here. And our motor asset is this portion over here. So I'll select my steel layer, activate my marquee tool, select that, shift and drag to add to my selection. Then activate my lasso tool by hitting L, and then Alt and click to remove this portion from my selection. and then G to fill that layer. I want to make sure that I have steel selected first. There we go. Try that again. Deselect. Let me refresh. That's better. Okay, so we can keep going. Maybe I'll take this nozzle down here and make that steel. And I think you get the point here. Maybe I'll make this rubber also. And then we'll call it done. Just verify. If you really wanted, in some cases, you can make these little strips here rubber. I'll probably skip that at the moment. And we'll see how this looks in Substance Designer. So let's finish it up. Additionally, these keys here, you could make maybe an emissive color if you want them to glow. We won't do that, but it's always an option. And maybe making this one here rubber and making this little tray gray. Okay, so let's change that nozzle. I'm going to find it in my 3D application quickly. Is that the whole thing? No, we want this one and this one. So all of these assets down here. Let's find them in Photoshop. Marquee select. I don't mind if there's some overlap because most of the surrounding objects are also steel. Okay. And this object here. Go. Refresh. That looks good. Now we're going to find that little rubber piece there, which should be the object right in the middle of what we just filled in. Find a layer that we have it created on by control left clicking. There we go. Layer 5 is it. I'm just going to use my brush instead of my fill tool here. Select my rubber material ID right there. Make sure I have my rubber layer selected and just paint that in. Let's refresh it. There we go. So now this object here is rubber, and I could, because we took the time to create this detail here, I could fill this this portion here in below the keys, maybe a painted metal. Let's see if we can find that information. First, let's find the tray in our 3D application. So this is the area that I want to look in Photoshop. This object right here. So it'll be underneath these keys. Just going to control left click on these arrows till I find the normal information I'm looking for. And I'm not finding it. Let me go back over to my normal map here. And if you want to find a specific layer in Photoshop, what you can always do is hit the V key, then control left click on some pixels on your screen, and it'll automatically select that information in your document. Hit Control C, switch back over to my document. It's possible that that layer wasn't copied over, because there it is now. Yeah, it wasn't. It's okay, we have it now. So let me control left click on that. Layer to make a selection, and I'll hide it because we don't want to use it. And then let me go to my painted metal layer, select painted metal from my palette here. And then I'll use my brush here because I don't want to fill in the entire layer, because this portion also includes areas of my pipes that I use the normal down for. You see right over here? I don't necessarily want those to be painted metal. Okay. Refresh. We'll see how this looks. Okay. So we'll call this material ID map done for the moment. And again, we can always make changes to Photoshop. So next we're going to jump into Substance Designer and begin to make some layered materials. Alright, see you then.